Welcome to your local agent podcast, episode 15. Guys, we're taking a different route. It's sort of like investment, but we're going to talk about life insurance. I know it's a weird topic, guys, but this is incredibly awesome. Without further ado, today we're accompanied by.
I'm Nico, and I am out of East Tennessee and dabble in a lot of investment opportunities.
Awesome. So, Nick, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you sort of do? And since I know you're a little bit on the investment side, how did that sort of come to be to you?
Well, I've been in real estate world for about 19 years, and just over time, just accumulated rentals on my own. And out of that, just as the space of investment has expanded to, we could do short-term, Airbnb has grown, and then owner financing. All of these different avenue streams have opened up. And so just over the years, we've slowly kind of slid into different avenues. And so I've got our teams in multiple different investment opportunities and investment portfolios across the East Tennessee area majority.
Awesome. Actually, when I first reached out to you, I mentioned how I saw you out of a podcast, and I did a little bit of research on you, and I heard that you know about creative financing and Pace Morby. I'm actually a big fan of Pace Morby, right? I recently met him last week or 2 weeks ago in Central Park. And out of curiosity, do you think that this sort of inspired you to become an investor in real estate, or did this sort of motivate you to do even more and learn more strategies?
I think for me, it opened up just another avenue of being creative with real estate. And, one of the great things that Pace does is he allows an avenue or a lane for us to not even have to use as much of our own money. It's not on my credit anymore. So I can leverage me, and it's more of just my time versus my credit score and cash. So that's the biggest win for me over time. And then it also opened up different opportunities for me when, as a real estate agent, if I couldn't sell a home and I didn't want to purchase it outright, just that subject to, for me, that opportunity became just another avenue for me for income stream.
Mm-hmm. And what do you say? What are some advice you say you have for agents who are looking to become investors and know more about these strategies?
Well, one of the things I would say is just every person that you come across, every person or relationship that you have in your life is always an opportunity to grow your net worth, to grow your sphere, to grow your investments. And so learning how to think outside the box is what really separates you. One of my mentors, Jim Rohn, that I love, he says, you're not paid by the hours you work, but you're paid by the value that you bring to the market. And I think that, Pace is such a good example of that, right? Changing the way that people are doing investments. And there's other people across our I guess, just across the field. There's Grant Cardone, there's Kiyosaki, but Pace is like that new jolt across the country, that people are falling in love with.
And as an agent who's an investor, would you say that brings you unique insights and advantages when you're handling clients who are looking to become investors?
Yeah, I think for me, being in the space myself is a daily muscle that I'm working to kind of think through strategies, think through opportunities. So when I'm representing a buyer or an investor, I think that muscle memory that I have plays a huge part into their success because of my negotiation skills. Also, just the ability to have opportunity that, I would say even years before I got into it, I would not have known. And so being in that space, I think is massive opportunity for investors. It's very important to hitch your wagon to somebody who plays in that same space that actually does what you're wanting to delve into. Investors and realtors, they're not all the same.
So now right here, someone that just entered, Dejanay and Regina, both of them were looking to become investors and work with more investors. But something that I'd like to go over is what makes you as a realtor different than a regular investor? Is there any superpower you have with having or access to the MLS? Like you have more off-market properties. What is the advantage of becoming a realtor and being an investor at the same time?
That probably ranges from an individual's perspective. I think for me personally, I just started in the realm of real estate. then
Mhm.
slowly got into investing. But where the advantage plays for me is I'm getting access to sellers that investors don't always have access to. So for example, my approach when I go to a listing is, will I buy this house? It's not always what is this house worth on the market to sell, whereas the approach is the same. I want to know what the value of that house is. But as a real estate agent, multiple times I find myself in that doorway before an investor, and I'm able to walk that seller through. Listen, this is what the market says your house is worth. This is what the commission is. This is what the repairs you need to take time to invest in to get done, paint these walls. If we back all of that out, this is what I'll buy your house for today. Whereas probably that's the price an investor is going to spend, right? So the benefit to me as an agent is I've already been there. And years ago, I would not have had that mindset. And that goes back to the prior question, right? That prior question of what's the advantage of working with someone like myself as an investor? If you are an investor, is I'm indoors with sellers that investors, they don't have access to immediately. And so that's been a big advantage for me. I've bought 2 houses in the last 3 months from that exact model. They never hit the market. Investors never saw them. I personally bought them. And I have flipped one already, and I bought another one 2 weeks ago, and I'm just started renovating that thing. So that's the biggest
Mm.
difference I would say sets me apart.
Awesome. So something I usually go over on these podcasts and actually go over a lot is the types of properties that investors usually tend to target. And I know most of those are like distressed properties or expired listings or pre-foreclosures, foreclosures. Would you say that you're sort of in the same boat when you're looking to buy properties, or what type of properties do you look for or going to buy uh as a realtor in this case?
I think for me individually, it's just cash flow, right? So
Mhm.
sometimes you can buy a home that's a new construction and they're in such a distressed situation that the numbers add up and the cash flow is still good. But typically, you're right. I mean, it's the distressed property. The 2 that I spoke of just a minute ago, they were both distressed property. One was an estate. The other one was just a couple who wanted to get out, and it was a rental for years, and um, they were distressed, So that's the bulk of my money will be made on the renovations, right? Just bought it real low, and I'm able to sell real high. But I'll tell you on the flip side, I run across some that's just carpet and paint. My wife and I say carpet and paint, brain surgery, it ain't. So it's just, there's a lot of houses that I'll buy. We just put paint on the walls, carpet in the bedrooms, and put it right back on the market. And we make good money, but it's because of the time that I'm having to invest in that property and the amount of, or the length of time that the cash I have is in that property. I make a great return. It may not be a great amount of money, but the return is high. So I look at the return on my investment.
And what's sort of the sweet spot for your return of investment? What's the sweet spot for you?
I like 30% is probably a minimum. I like to make 30%. Otherwise, for me, I'll typically pass it down to an investor. And the only reason for that is time, right? So if I can make money by selling it to an investor for less than 30%, it's a win-win. I make cash. They create a great investment. Many of our investors, if they can make 10 or more percent, it's a great investment for them. And one of the things we've been able to build is, as I have accumulated rentals, I started a property management company. And so a lot of those properties that we're selling to our investors, we're also managing. So we're sort of double dipping into the investments. So mine's 30. Obviously, everybody's going to be a little bit different, but that's the number that makes it worth it for me.
Mm. Now, before we started this call, you mentioned about Airbnbs and how you did all these types of investment properties. And actually, I came up on my last episode, we sort of talked to an expert in something called pad splitting. It's something new that recently came up to mind, and wanted to know if you sort of know about pad splitting and what sort of your thoughts on it.
You know what? I know of it. I don't know a lot about it. And honestly, the
Mhm.
main reason is I'm married with kids and I would never do it. So I don't want to, I would do an Airbnb, right? So I go to the beach or go to the mountains where I'm from, the Smoky Mountains, and I would rent an Airbnb. I would never pad split. So time wise, it's not worth my diving into it, but it's a great concept because I think if I were in college, post college, single, I would totally stay in one. But because it's not my lane and I wouldn't do it, I just don't have a lot of knowledge on the subject. But it's
Ah,
great. Yeah.
yeah. So just to like give you a little bit of overview, right? On last episode, went about pad splitting and how it's basically like house hacking where you rent out each room, but
Right.
essentially you double your income or your cash flow, right? So let's say if you're just doing a traditional rental, you get like 1,000. But recently what Shani went over, her name is Shani, by the way. She went over how you could rent each room and potentially even double or triple your income just based off of that by renting like a 4 bedroom, 2 bathroom. For each bedroom will be 500. You grow it for 2,000 a month instead of just the additional 1,000. So we went over how about that strategy and how so that's sort of taking our Airbnb. Pretty amazing. But anyways, to go over to the cream of the crop, to something I was really excited to know more about, and I actually told about these investors, is how what's your can you share your experience with a overfunded whole life policy? What sort of what is that, right? And what is the cash value life insurance and how does it work?
Sure. Yeah. So an a overfunded whole life insurance policy is similar to term insurance or just whole life, right? And so this is just another stream that for me was the most interesting, where I get to actually infuse this policy with cash. And the beautiful thing about this policy, which before I really go into, I just say I'm not a financial advisor. This is just me, right? So this is what I do personally. So I want to make a disclaimer. It's just what I do. So obviously talk to a strategist, not myself over it. But what we do is, you'll have a life insurance policy and say that my life insurance policy for $1 million is $500 a month. And with the beautiful thing about an overfunded is I can pay $2,000 a month. So I'm putting 1,500 of my own cash into an equivalent of an online bank account, but it's basically compounding over time. Every month I'm making that $2,000 payment, and of that 2,000, 1,500 goes into this account, and it just accrues generally 4 to 8%, and it kind of changes periodically. Mine is 5.78 at the moment, and it's a compounded interest. And the beautiful thing about it is anytime I need it, I can just similar to an online bank account, I can move it to my personal, brick and mortar bank, and I can go pay cash for an investment. And it can be anything, right? So it doesn't even have to be real estate. It can be, I want to buy a new car. So I will go and take my own cash and purchase this car. But one of the beautiful things about it is that cash remains in that bank account accruing interest, even though I've used it. And the reason that is able to do that is my life insurance policy is the collateral that is being used, right? So I'm borrowing against my life. So if I borrowed $100,000 of my own money, my money remains in that account, but the insurance company lends me the money, but it's lent on my life. And so the beautiful ability of that is it's all tax-free growth. All of the money that is compounding each year is tax-free growth. I can take it anytime I want. And unlike a 401k, it's forever tax-free. All the growth, anytime I borrow it, it's tax-free, and I can borrow it anytime I want. So those are the beautiful mechanisms of it that I love. So I don't know if that makes much sense. A lot of time
Mm.
when I explain it to people, it's just so outside the box. It takes a little time to digest it.
So you essentially become your own bank, right? That's where the infinite banking system
That's
sort
right.
of idea came into play.
Exactly.
Ah,
Yeah. And the godfather of it is Nelson Nash. He wrote a great book on the subject, Becoming Your Own Banker.
What's interesting now is that there's the insurance firm guy I was mentioning earlier is here. Harold, you can sort of introduce yourself and sort of what you're doing, and sort of it'll give a little bit more insight on this. See, you talked to me about it earlier, and I was completely brainstormed. All right, I was completely lost when you explained it to me, but it was great. I'd love to hear even more. Provide value. So,
Thank you so
oh,
much, Justin. I was
you're
not.
muted. Yeah,
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
yeah.
I thank you so much, Justin. I was not expecting to be talking today, so I appreciate you giving me a space to speak. I am walking through Manhattan right now. I'm about to hit Central Park, so it might be a little noisy. Um, Nick, I want to say your podcast with Caleb Williams was fantastic. I sent that over to Justin, and within the same week of him listening to that podcast, he reached out to you. So this kid is such an action taker. Yeah, so I've one of the things that I'm working on a lot in the whole life insurance space as an insurance advisor is bringing this information to more real estate investors. And you already know how all of this works now. I was actually having a conversation with one today, and we were speaking about the different level of investors and how they could utilize something like this. So I'm curious, you being someone that's used this so much, who is using infinite banking for real estate investing? Who is that for, and who is it not for?
I would say a baseline is it's for anyone, but you really want to put a minimum of $10,000 a year in. And if you can't do that, it's most likely not for you, but it doesn't mean that there's not value in it for you. But, as an investor, I would say you really need to put about $10,000 minimum per year in. And the reason I say that is otherwise it's the compounding interest effect. You're generally getting minimum baseline of about 4%. And so that gets you a couple $1,000s a year, but over time, right? So you're compounding every month you're putting into it. But, just like any other avenue for investing, it isn't for everyone. What I love about it is, I'm putting my money in a bank and I'm making zero income, zero return on that money. So if that alone is worth it for me, right? So I'm making a base of 4% on my money every year. So I'm cutting inflation in half. Say inflation is 9% or 10%, I'm getting a base of 4. So now inflation for me and my dollar that I own is only losing 6% rather than 9 or 10%. So I'm just trying to hedge against that inflation. And I just want to become very aggressive with maintaining the money that I worked my whole life to make, right? And so every year I've just learned, man, I'm giving this money to the government, to the banks, and I wanted that money back. And that's what motivated me, right? So I wanted to retain my cash. So really, that's why I say it could be for anyone. It doesn't have to always be about just investing. You could just do it for the sure reason that you're not losing as much money every year.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that you mentioned there's different ways to use it too, one of the things that I went over with the investor I was speaking to today, he's actually part of the sub-2 community, Pace Morby. I'm sure you're aware of them.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware of this because in my mind, I'm learning more about real estate investing and how I can bring that infinite banking service to them. And now I'm learning that you don't even necessarily have to be the person that's buying the property, be involved in the deals. He's telling me about loan sponsors. He's telling me about hard money lending. So could you maybe touch a little bit more on how people could use their cash value in real estate investing that isn't always just owning the house?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you 2 examples that I'm doing, or maybe 3. Each state obviously has usury laws. So you want to know what your state is and what your interest is of a usury law. But there's ways around that. You just want to speak to a lawyer. But, some of the things we do is I do creative financing with my money. So for like literally today, I was telling Justin as I walked in, a friend/client is asking for a certain amount of money. We'll say 20 grand, right? They need it for 30 days at a max of 60 days. Well, I have this chunk of cash sitting here. I'm able to solve an issue for my friend and charge a little bit of interest where my money's sitting there already making 4 to 8%. I lent it to him at 10%, now all of a sudden I'm making 15% on my money. Does that make sense? So that's one avenue. Just, I think 2 days ago, I'm lending a friend of mine like $5,000 at about 11 to 12% because he needs to buy an equipment piece for his business. So there's just all these avenues. It doesn't even have to be real estate. And then the third option is we have investors that need money for a down payment. And so we'll give the 20% down or the 25% down with a return. So we'll, in essence, be a second. And then we put the lien on the property. So should it fall through, he's got a little bit of skin in the game, but I also own the property because he's going to have put some things in. If someone's doing it without a partnership, we do like them having skin in the game, 10%, 15%, and then we'll lend the rest. So there's so many avenues. And I think just like anything, and you'll hear Pace talk about this a lot, but the sooner you jump into something and you allow your mind to expand, you know, your reticular gland and your brain, it sort of opens up, you know, like say you want to buy a black Tesla and you don't see any in town. The moment you decide I'm buying a black Tesla, you see 15 to 20 of them just all over, right? Because you're focused on it. All of a sudden opportunity presents itself. And so it's really endless. You know, you guys may be in stuff like Harold, you may be in a lane that I've never dreamed of. But the beautiful thing about whole life is you have cash now to jump into something, right? And that's the beauty that everyone on this call, we should all have a policy because we all have opportunity that is non-competitive to each and every one on this call, right? So that's the beauty of it. But there's risk, right? So everybody's level of risk ranges. So that's why I say it may not be for everybody, but everybody can utilize it, which is beautiful.
Yeah, you know, that, sorry, Justin, I see you look like you're about to unmute. I don't know if you don't mind me asking one more question. So great points. One other thing that I think in terms of risk, right? A big risk, especially when it comes to using the infinite banking strategy, is knowing that the policy or the plan that you're putting your money into is structured properly. And that's a conversation I've had with real estate investors where they ask me, how do I actually know that this is structured properly for me? Now, obviously, I know this because this is what I specialize in. But from you being a real estate investor and you speaking to other investors, what advice would you give them what are the good questions for them to ask an advisor like myself so that they know, all right, this is actually going to be in my favor and they're not just trying to make a big commission check off of me?
Yeah, that's perfect. I mean, part of it is I always encourage people to know who their advisor is. And then you need to share what is your ultimate goal, right? So like I have a couple of different policies, and one is after 10 years is my break even to a point where the cash I've put in is equal to the cash available every month. Like my total monthly is equal to what's totally in there. And then there's one where I've got started recently that's going to be 6 years in. So part of one is just a cash engine. But some of the questions you want to see is like, you want it to be a cash rich policy. And basically, you would be better on the verbiage, Harold. So just speaking like specific verbiages. But what I look for is I want a cash rich policy that day one, I can borrow at least 80% of it, right? And then after year two or year one, rather, I can have 100% of that cash value. But obviously, you're getting cash, so your life value is a little bit lesser. If that makes sense. So how would you frame for you, if I were to come to you, what are some of the questions that you in your role, Harold, how are you kind of leading that conversation with someone like if I were a newbie coming in saying, hey, I watched this podcast with Nico and Justin and not quite sure what that is, but I know it has to do with cash rich policy. Can you walk me through that?
Yeah, of course. So first thing that's most important is the purpose. Why are the people trying to take out the money? What are they investing into real estate for? Is it something that is just supplemental income that they're trying to create aside from their 9 to 5? Or is this something that they're going full on in? They really want to leverage their cash, make it do more work for them. Based off of that, and based off of course, how much cash they actually have on hand, I would actually know, well, what exactly is the right amount for you to start overfunding your policy with? Because you said it perfectly. And for anybody that may not know this, the way that people overfund the policy is there's a cost to that death benefit. Whatever is over that cost of that death benefit is what's going to be going into your cash value. So the way that these policies are structured so that you can leverage them tax-free without flagging the IRS is you got to meet that cap of how much money you can be putting in for that X amount of death benefit. If you go over that number, that policy now becomes taxable. So how much of that cash do we make liquid and how low we make that death benefit is based on, well, how much money does this person need in the next 1 to 5 years to be able to invest into their real estate? And then that's where we were able to have that conversation on right structuring.
That's great. Yeah, that's one of the things, like I think the verbiage is mech, right? So like you can mech over your policy. And so one of the things I do, and which again, I got into it and I fumbled around, and then after a year or so being in it, I really just doubled down on what I did. So I am a real estate agent by trade. And so, we pay quarterly. And so one of the things I talk about on Caleb's podcast is I got frustrated giving the government, $30,000-$50,000 a quarter. And I thought, man, and I realized, wow, I could put this in this policy, right? So that began that journey for me of like, oh, I got to make sure I'm not mecking and going over my policy. So then I opened another policy, then another policy. So I have multiple policies, but now I have that compounded growth, but also I'm having tax-free growth on all of my income, and then I'm just lending it out now. And so at the end of the year, I'll take my taxes that I owe the government that I've been getting 4 to 8%. I'll pay the taxes. And one of the things that you probably can't say, Harold, is, I don't have to pay that money back. That money's still in the policy getting 4 to 8%, which is amazing. And how that is paid back is when I die, right? So if I have $1 million and I've borrowed 900 grand, my family gets $100,000 instead of $1 million because it pays that debt off. Now, savvy investors are purchasing investments that are giving a greater return, right? So we have, a portfolio of investment properties that are making 15 to 25%. So it's greater use of that money. And then when I die, my children will have that as investments, right? So they don't necessarily need the life policy.
Well, I want to touch on that because that's such a great transition. You read my mind on what I wanted to ask you next, which is when I speak to real estate investors, I see a lot of the end goal because I focus a lot on why. What is the end goal with all this? Why are you amassing so much real estate, this big portfolio? What's going to happen when you're not here? Majority of people want to create a legacy, generational wealth, and they want to pass it on to their kids. What people don't normally speak about with the infinite banking after they look at the shiny object of it in terms of living benefits is eventually you're going to pass that portfolio over to your kids. And now that's where estate taxes come in. So what's that conversation look like on your end with your advisors and how you've used whole life insurance, not just to invest into real estate, but also prepare for that passing of wealth?
Well, to be transparent, we're actually in the midst of that right now. We've had a lot of growth in the last year and a half. And so I'm forming the trust for my family. I'm forming multiple LLCs. So that funnel looks great, right? And so one of the great books I read out there, which I'll say, I believe the title has changed, but it's What Would the Rockefellers Do? Great book, opened my eyes. And the idea, right, is when I pass, say I have a $10-15 million policy, goes to my family, goes to my trust, right? Stays in my family. It funds my children, funds their children. And every person born in my lineage down will have a policy, right? So that trust will open a policy. And so that's how it's funneled, right? And so my wife, when she gets my death benefit, it's not going to go straight to her per se. It'll go in the trust. The trust will fund our life. And then we have investments that will provide monthly income. But one of the things I was telling Justin, at his age, man, if you 18 and under, they don't have to have the health test, they can just get that policy. So if you're not 18 and you can do it and you can make that payment, what a great opportunity, right? You don't have any pre-existings, you don't have anything like that to start a journey for your family.
Yeah, and to add to that, for the parents out there that are looking for ways not just to create generational wealth through, people are able to structure whole life policies for their kids and stop paying for that policy when they hit 18 years old, 20 years old, and the money in that account continues to compound. So it's just added on to that strategy. Now, if you want your kids to be real estate investors, stop thinking about, maybe people can one day stop thinking about 529 college plans and think about real estate investment plans. Sure. How can I save up for my child so they can start investing into real estate when they graduate from high school?
That's right. Well, think about the college plan, right? What if your kid doesn't go to college? Now you have all this tax burden of that policy because you can only use it for certain things, right? Either you're going to go to college or you're going to have to take that money out and pay taxes. So even if that's what your goal is, you could put it in one of these whole life policies. And if they don't go to college, guess what? You have tax-free growth. And if you use it for something else, there's no penalty. There's no taxes on that. And so that's the beauty of using this tool. Is just doesn't matter what you do. You can, if an emergency comes up, or if you want to go on a vacation that's unplanned, you have money in this account. Then you don't have to have that burden paying that credit card back, or that burden of, this is our savings. It's untouched savings, your 3 to 6 months worth of living. There's so many avenues. It kind of, every day I'm learning more about it, and I'm multiple years into this. So it's pretty crazy.
Oh yeah, Nick, thank you. I'm going to stop my questions now because this is Justin's podcast. But Justin, I appreciate you letting me ask him a couple of questions. I hope that was helpful.
No, right away, just take the spotlight, because it's not my podcast anymore, but it's okay. No, actually, that's very informative, right? It even opened my mind even more. It was like, wow, just hearing two experts go at it. It's like, okay, how much can I intake right before my brain explodes? Awesome. So this is where I like to transition, and so a Q&A session. If there's any this is why I move it to my realtors and investors to ask their own sort of questions here. And since you're a realtor yourself, and Regina here and Dejane are both realtors as well. I'd love to just know more about you guys and just have a question. So if we're gonna start off with Regina, if you're here, I don't know if you're here. Just say hello in the chat or come off mute.
It'd be great to even hear as they're coming on, Justin, is how many of the people on the call actually have a policy. And then obviously after they introduce themselves, I'd love to hear either if they have questions about it or how they see that it could be beneficial to their career as a real estate agent.
Hi, Nick. Hi, Justin. Hi. My name is Regina. Like Justin mentioned, I'm a realtor in the Inland Empire. Just been doing this a little under 2 years. So much like everybody else, I'm learning things every day. And it just blows my mind how knowledge of real estate can really change people's trajectory in life. And like you guys mentioned, the generational wealth that you can build upon and leave for your children. So interesting enough that you guys are talking about this, because this was something that I was on my list to research about, because I heard about it, but I didn't know too much about it. So definitely want to discuss it more in depth with Harold, because I didn't realize that this is what you did. So I can learn, because yes, ultimately the goal is to leave something for my children and just kind of get them started in the right path, because obviously I'm a first generation, and obviously I don't know what I don't know. And I'm like 36 years old figuring this out, and I just wish I had known it sooner, but no time like the present. So I'm trying to change the trajectory of my children's life for the better and the coming generation. So thank you guys for sharing your wisdom. I really appreciate it. I don't really have any specific questions. I'd have to research a little more so I can reach out to one of you guys and get more specific details on what that policy might look like and how I can implement it into my career.
Okay. Now moving on to Dejane. I don't know if you're here. You can hear me. Say hello and introduce yourself, if you don't mind.
Okay. Hi, Justin and everyone else. My name is Dejane. I'm a realtor in Maryland, and I do have a policy already. It is term, and I have one for my child. as well, and I'm looking to get a whole life as well. I guess my question would be, how do you approach suggesting it to your clients and how it could help them?
Is that for me or is that for Harold?
I guess either one.
Okay. Harold, do you want to jump on? I mean, I'm a real estate agent and I don't necessarily recommend it to just any of my clients, mostly my investors only, right? So I have a small wealth group that we do with just realtors. And then I have a group that I have that are just investors. They're not realtors or anything like that. So I talk to those people about the benefits. And then of course, as non-realtors come into my life, I talk to them about the power of it, right? And so part of that is until they're ready, it's that age-old saying of like the what is it? It's when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And so it's a similar concept, right? Like you're listening for trigger words of somebody saying, man, I wish I had the cash to invest in some real estate. And so you just start, hey man, I hear you talking a lot about needing cash. Have you ever considered an overfunded whole life? Most people, and when I say that, I mean 99.9% of people in our culture have no idea, and it doesn't make any sense because our society almost teaches the complete opposite, right? So our society says you go and you make 10 grand and you put that $10,000 in the bank and you save that thing until you take retirement. Well, the problem is inflation is say 10% and you're making 0.001%. And at the end of the day, you're going to have zero money. You're going to have zero purchase power. So someone has to really want to understand that for you to really have an avenue to share that with them. So part of that is the people you're around, like this call. The people on this call have similar mindsets, and it'll kind of solidify as time goes on, right? So you start doing the same things, that wheel becomes a snowball effect. So I'm not sure if that answers your question, but the fact you're on this call and you're doing self-discovery will enable you to have that vocabulary to share to your clients, right? And then once that one client does it, it becomes kind of that catapult for you to have a talk piece, right? So I've had to do this for years to have anyone have interest in what I'm doing. And so that's the same with you, right? So you buckle up, understand it, call Harold, call other realtors like myself, and happy to share it with you. And then once you grasp it and you do it yourself, people want to be with you, around you, and to live your life. And then you don't really have to convince them. They're just going to do whatever you ask them because they aspire to be like you.
Okay, thank you.
And Harold, if you want to touch base on any of this or add on some stuff, we gotta hop off and give us what you thought.
No, I think Nick hit it really well, especially for real estate investors. It may be a new idea, but I agree with everything he said. I would only add, this is for traditional home buyers, since Dejane, you're speaking about your clients in very general ways. Some of them are probably traditional home buyers too, is if they're not really going down the investor route, they're not looking to put money into some cash value life. You have a term policy. So anybody that you could think of a term life policy also like mortgage protection. I recently, and I'll tell you guys a story right now. I had a buddy of mine. We've been friends for a long time. We wrestled together in high school. I got really close with his family. His parents did a lot for me after I graduated high school. And unexpectedly, his dad died of a heart attack 2 weeks ago. Out of nowhere, I had just seen him the week before. And now the conversations that I'm having with my buddy is, this is not the center of the conversation. It's a lot about, emotional upliftment and just being there with him. But last night was the first time he brings it up to me. He's like, hey, I don't know how we're going to pay off this mortgage. People are donating money to us and whatnot, but, we still have another 15 years left on this. And so that's a reality that some families have to face when one breadwinner in the household passes away and now they don't have the support of their income to pay off that mortgage. So if you want to speak about that with your clients and just especially a lot of people I've sat with, I found that they buy homes, especially the traditional home buyers. And I know this is about real estate investors, so I won't touch on this for too long, but what I found is there are traditional home buyers out there that are very tight on money and their mortgage makes up the majority of their expense, which means if their plan doesn't go the way that they think it will go, like they could essentially lose all of that. So all that term life is like a risk management management strategy, which is exactly what that whole life and infinite banking is. It's control. It's a form of risk management to what Nick was talking about with inflation and what money does in a savings account versus in a cash value account. So those are just a couple ideas that I would throw out there.
And now let me recommend one more thing, if that's okay, because this is one of the ways I started as a real estate agent. You know, just as an example, our clients as traditional home buyers, they're never going to get into this. It just doesn't make sense to them. They're not aspiring to leave a legacy per se in that realm. Obviously, everyone wants to raise their kids, leave a legacy in that way. Now, one of the ways that I was able to start this for me was I lent money to a seller to put a deposit down on a rental because they moved out of state. I gave them money to rent a U-Haul truck to drive out of state, and I lent that money to them. And of course, there's going to be some clients that are like, wow, where did that money come from? And then that opens a door. But I would probably encourage you to delve into it, understand, and change your legacy. And as you change your legacy, people will take notice and your clients will take notice. And then you become inspirational to them and change their family tree by you just living your life out and changing your own family tree. So, but be thinking along the lines of your own clients and helping them through the avenue of whole life, and Harold, sharp dude. I mean, you need to definitely dig deep with him, and he understands what he's talking about. And those are the people you want to surround yourself with, because they have a passion and a heart to get you from A to B, right? He's not in that industry to make money, because I'll tell you, there's faster ways to make money than to sell overfunded whole life. They don't actually make as much money as selling stock or other ways to invest money. That's on the low pole. So I'll tell you, it's not a get rich scheme. And I say that only because I know you wouldn't say that, Harold, but I know, the guys that I use, they don't make a ton of money on it. It's but they believe in what I want to do, and that's leave a legacy for my family and my kids.
Awesome. This is amazing. Hopefully, Dejanay, this is helpful. Thumbs up. And remember, I'll send you guys an email about everything in later. All the information about Nick here for you guys to reach him out, and about Harold, reach him out as well. And I'll be glad to transition and move over to like Nick. Where can the people find you, and on what social platforms?
Well, I'm on most of them. We're building out the kind of getting a little bit more involved in the social media platforms, but I mean, we've got a website. The majority of my information has to do with list and sell brick and mortar type real estate. But I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and probably the best way, I'm on Instagram, which is just Realtor in Nico. And my last name, you can see it on the screen there, but it's just Realtor in Nico. That's probably the thing I'm the most active on, that and Facebook. And I don't respond immediately, but I do respond. And that's me. I run it personally myself. But happy to answer any questions. And also, man, I'd love to partner with you guys. And that's how you move faster, right? So just partnerships. We can leverage each other's time and energy.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll definitely pass it on to my wholesaling team as well. I'd love to add these to our buyers list and just close deals together, JV style.
Same. Appreciate your time, man. Appreciate everybody's time.
Awesome. Have a great day, guys.